Good morning on this Sunday, October 27th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Drama unfolds on Capitol Hill as Republicans storm a closed-door hearing in the impeachment investigation of the president, and some Georgia lawmakers joined in. We now know who will moderate the Democratic presidential debate to be held in Metro Atlanta, and they're all female. And the state studies high-speed rail from Atlanta to Charlotte. Not sure why, but we'll get into that. Theron, Phil, Janelle, and Alexis are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
More than 20 Republican lawmakers protested closed-door impeachment hearings and refused to leave a secure hearing room on Capitol Hill. Among them, Georgia Congressman Buddy Carter and Jody Hice. And Phil, Republicans, including Jody Hice, were allowed in that hearing. So a lot of questions, were these theatrics or were these actions really justified?
Well, they were both. There's nothing wrong with some theatrics that are justified by either party. I mean, you had the Democrats sitting in and flouting all of the House rules right there on the House floor. You remember, over some phony gun control bill. So there's nothing wrong with it. You're getting the attention of the American people. That's good, because this is a good thing and it's a good debate to have. I'm talking about due process. If you're talking about a heavyweight thing like the impeachment of a president of the United States, I don't care what party the president is in, this is heavy duty. The rules are being flouted by this Adam Schiff, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. It shouldn't even be in the purview of the Intelligence Committee. You can't see documents. The president's not allowed to have lawyers. One congressman that was in the 20 Republicans there said, I can't even see the official transcripts. I have to have some Democrat babysitter there. I can't even take it out. So this is I think it's backfiring on the Democrats, and the Republicans were right to point this out.
Yeah. I totally disagree with you, Phil. Come on. This is exactly what the Republicans did with Benghazi. Come on, the rules were set then by the Republicans of how this procedure was supposed to go. In addition to that, the Justice Department did not investigate anything when it was brought up to them. And so this is the investigation period that's going on, and it has to be done confidentially because of witnesses not being able to compare notes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is the reason that it's being done this way. And it's shortly after all the evidence is gathered, they'll be able to do the public hearings.
Janelle, what about this argument that it is an investigation and that investigations are confidential?
No, that's not true. I feel like this is the Democrats' weak attempt to throw Hail Marys, and the Republicans just continue to pick them off one by one. The fact of the matter is that if you want to do an investigation, you should do it properly. Having a judicial process is why the reason why we have that is so that we don't have these continual charades of just games that the Democrats continue to play. And it's so frustrating every time we listen to it over and over and over again. They did it with Kavanaugh, they did it with William Barr. It's just, I mean, they just see that Trump is definitely heading into a re-election and they're afraid.
Theron, I have counted 3 sighs over there. You're sighing over there 3 times. So go ahead and weigh in.
No, that's fine. I learned how to be patient. No, I think it was a pitiful failed stunt by the Republican lawmakers. And I just want to, remind us of some history. Not only did they violate security protocol, but when I did my homework on this, is that this is the same rules that the Republican majority put in place.
Thank you.
And so they're crying about what they basically put into law. That's number one. Number two, to Alexis's point, there was 102 out of 103 testimonials and testimonies that were all during the Benghazi hearing that were behind closed doors. So 102 out of 103. So what is going on is that they had a failed attempt to try to change the narrative. And this president is scared that there's some evidence. As we, sit here, we know that there's a new person who actually heard the call between the president and the president from Ukraine. No, this person's coming out.
His statement was public. That his opening statement was public.
So let me finish. So the thing is this. They were just trying to basically change the narrative, and they failed. At the end of the day, I think the Democrats are handling this the same way that Republicans handled the impeachment process against Bill Clinton. Matter of fact, I think Democrats are actually being more transparent and they're being more fair to Republicans. And so at the end of the day, I think that this is a sort of equivalent to a grand jury process where there got to be questions, there got to be confidential evidence that's going to be provided. And so who knows what they're going to try to do next week.
Well, I don't know how you can compare Benghazi to the impeachment of the President of the United States, where you need to have accountability and transparency.
No,
I thought that's what the Democrats
don't correct
were
me wrong, but
before that.
But is it not true, Phil, that the same rules that the Democrats are following right now, your party created them?
Actually, that's not true.
That is totally true.
That is not
you
true.
One thing you're not doing this show is
I think there's no due process.
Besides,
I thought you were in favor of due process.
Let Phil finish.
I thought you were in favor of due process, and I think it's a canon of American law that you're trying to dynamite the Democrats, where you face your witnesses. You can't even do that.
This will come. This time will come.
Oh no, this is a selective leak. It's
investigation process,
propaganda.
and this is not the impeachment process. This is inquiry as to whether there will be an impeachment process.
Okay, I want to move on because Democrats took issue with another of President Trump's tweets this week. This time it was the one that described the impeachment investigation as a lynching. Janelle, I know that you wanted to talk about this because Congressman John Lewis called Trump's comments, quote, obscene. But then we learned that's actually how some Democrats refer to the impeachment proceedings against former President Bill Clinton. We'll let you weigh in first,
Yeah,
Janelle.
so I want to start by saying that my response right now is not so much in the defense of the president, because he does not need me to defend him because he did nothing wrong. My response is in the defense of the African American community as a whole. We have got to be clear and understand that the word lynching is not synonymous to African Americans. There were individuals that were lynched that were not African American.
Because they supported
and no, they were not.
African-Americans.
John Heath is a white male who was lynched because of burglary, not because he was in support of African Americans. So that is not true. And if we continue to do this, my frustration is that when we have elected officials who are in a position of power, who harp on words, instead of doing things that can actually benefit the districts that they serve, then we are grossly neglecting those who are being impacted. And that is a problem for me. I work with many of elected officials. I know some that are on my political side and some who are not, who are in districts that are predominantly African American. And one thing I know for sure is that they can use a town hall for these congressional candidates. They can use these congressional candidates coming in and walking through their failing schools. They can use these congressional candidates coming in and hosting cleanups in their neighborhoods. These are things that you can put your energy into that will yield so many more returns, and positive returns at that, than harping on one word that's not synonymous to just African American.
It's not. It's harping on this president who consistently uses racist tropes to distract the media from what is really the question at hand. Historically, lynching has referred to black people being killed without due process, without anything,
It's
without
not
any
just
redressability.
black people.
Historically, this is the case. There have been 4,000 lynchings on record that we know of. This
not
is
just black
come
people.
on. It may not be just, but predominantly in the history of this country.
There were white Republicans
it
during
is-
a Reconstruction era that were lynched for supporting civil rights for
Exactly.
blacks.
Well, that's the whole point.
they were lynched
It's
right
about
along with
race.
blacks.
It's all about
if you want to
race.
be
I
the
can't believe
racism
that you're
police,
sitting
if you
here
want to be
saying
the
this.
racism
I
police,
don't wanna
then
be the-
why is Ralph Northam, Governor Ralph Northam, still in office? If you want to be the racism police, then let's not just harp on one thing that's coming from one person. There are individuals on the left that do things that are
This is
far more
because
racist.
this is the president of the United States. He's the leader of the
Okay.
country. He's supposed to be setting the tone, and that's why we're harping
Let
on
me
him.
jump in on this, and I think, Janelle, I'm going to have to push back on you. I mean, as an African American woman.
Yes.
All right.
Who's educated.
Hold on.
the
Well,
issue.
I'm educated too. All right. So you can't come on this show and make sense, because to Alexis' point, predominantly of the people who would lynch were people who looked like you, me, and Alexis. Hold on. Let me finish. So what is obscene about this is what Congressman Lewis said, is that he's comparing. So y'all didn't defend. I would have expected you all to
let's
say,
talk about
no.
what's
You,
the
I would have
context of
expected
it.
you.
Fair and
No, I
finish.
would have expected you to say on this show that the president used a very racial, bigot word as lynching, comparing what he's going through in an impeachment process. Because last time I checked, no one was killed from being impeached. Because the worst thing that can happen to this president is that he can go and get impeached and go back to being a billionaire businessman. But I think what you have to be careful of is that this is a very, very sensitive topic, and to try to say, I want to take up for the white people and the other people that are not
never
African.
said I
No,
was taking up for the
you're
white
offended.
people. I never said that.
No, but we all know that there were other races that were lynched, but people who look like me, you, and Alexis sitting on the show were lynched for no reason at all.
The definition of the lynching.
I'm
If
very-
you know the definition of it, you know that it is when you commit a murder or a crime, or a crime,
But
let me get that, or a crime without having full or fair, trial. That is exactly what's happening right now.
Don't get mad at John Lewis.
Well, because he
Don't
used
get
the
mad at
word,
Congressman.
because
No.
I'm not mad at John Lewis.
Do you
because he
support-
used the word
do you
lynching in the proper
support-
definition.
do you support what he
it's not
said?
a problem
Do
with
you
that.
support what
I'm totally fine. I'm totally fine with what the president said, because he used the word in the
Okay.
proper definition.
Okay.
You
Come
have
on.
to. You have to consider context. You have to consider context. And
you
over and
are-
over again, we
you are
continue
on a slippery
over and
slope,
over
sister.
again.
Okay, we are going to wrap it there
use
because
words out of
Slippery
context.
slope,
we are going to
You're-
agree
that's
to
exactly what you're
disagree.
doing today.
I refuse.
Don't-
I'm sorry.
don't forget where you came from.
Okay.
I refuse. Oh, that's oh god. See,
Okay.
that's what the
Okay.
black woman
Now,
wants
see,
to hear.
This is a tough one.
Apparently I'm not black enough. So now I'm not black enough.
code word?
No,
I mean, this is what I'm talking about.
Okay, all of you, we are going to agree to disagree on this
No,
issue, and
I
we'll
am
move
not
on.
gonna
And the
agree to disagree.
Facebook
Yeah.
followers
Black people
will
were
move
lynched in
on
this
from
country.
here.
And
And
for the
coming
president to
up,
say that was totally
MSNBC announced that the moderators for their next Democratic presidential debate will discuss straight ahead.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Healthy debate, that's what we're all about. MSNBC announced the moderators for their next Democratic presidential debate to be held somewhere in metro Atlanta. All 4 of them are women. Darren,
Great. I
with the
mean,
focus on women, is this debate likely to be held in the suburbs?
Yeah, wonderful. I think MSNBC chose a good debate moderators. I think that at the end of the day, you have heard some criticism about, there are some qualified men that they thought should be in the debate. But at the end of the day, listen, I mean, the Democratic Party, we don't have a problem with empowering women, particularly women of color. And making sure that they're on the forefront. So I thought it was a good move by MSNBC, and I think that, Georgia will benefit from it.
Maybe would weigh in on
Well, I
this.
think it's fine you've got women, but they're all liberal women. How about
This is
maybe a
MSNBC,
moderate?
come on.
Maybe a moderate. Well, they are. You know the backgrounds of these women, and there's nothing wrong with having some
But they're
liberal
all good
questioners.
journalists.
And yes, the point. I'm not attacking the 4 women for being journalists. I'm attacking the fact there's no diversity of people that can ask some probing questions, even if they're political centrists or we even know their politics. Why not? This actually makes candidates better when you get probing questions rather than these softball questions. So
How do you know
I
they're
think
gonna be softball questions?
because I followed all 4 of these journalists, and Rachel Maddow is just going to be but she's the worst, just issuing all this pablum and trying to.
I don't know. I
not
think,
be
that, I
probing.
think that
Watch.
these women will be able to differentiate among the candidates because we know that they're all different perspectives on the Democratic side. But I want to move now to the online resumes. We know that you keep tabs on them, Phil. But the AJC reports that the Chief Justice of Georgia Supreme Court, Harold Melton, met with Governor Brian Kemp about the open Senate seat when Senator Johnny Isakson retires at the end of the year. Phil, he doesn't have a lot of campaign experience, but he's so well respected. Would he be a really good choice?
Well, yes, the Harold Melton is being thrown out there. There's another name, a very well-to-do
thrown out.
businessman.
Did he apply, though?
Can I get out my points here? Jack Markwalter, he's going to be considered. Why? Why are all these people going to be in the top 5? Number 1, we've talked about is electability. And number 2, you've got to hit the ground fast there, and you've run campaigns before. This goes for both parties. You got to hit the ground running, and you got to be able to raise money quickly. So we're talking again for viewers just coming in, 2 U.S. Senate races in November 2020. The one race we're talking about has to be done by an appointee by the governor who's in there for 10 months. Now, anybody else can run, Democrat or Republican, in this primary, but they have to have the money and electability. I'm not sure if a Harold Melton, a good jurist, I'm not sure if he could raise the money or get his name out quickly. That's the question that'll be asked of him.
Do with this focus on women, with the Democratic presidential debate, are we hearing more female names popping up? We know that we've got, Jan Jones is in there. Jackie Gingrich Cushman has been a name that's been talked about. But, what about a focus on women when you're going to have 2 men at the top of the ticket?
I know,
for
yes. So
Republicans?
I haven't heard anything as far as new women that are in the race. But I do want to mention that I'm a fan of Judge Melton. I think he's a great pick. What I do like about it is that he's operated in a nonpartisan space. So I think that kind of gives you the fresh eyes that the Senate needs. So I'm a fan of him.
All right. Moving on.
Did he apply, though? That's the thing. He has to apply.
No,
or
yeah,
be
I mean,
He's
but there's
in a
time.
meeting, but I'm sure he will apply.
There's time. The AJC is reporting the Securities and Exchange Commission is now looking into how some Atlanta airport funds were used because the federal guidelines, Phil, are very specific on how airport funds should be doled out and how they are used. And I think a lot of folks are wondering about the open records request issue from last week.
Again, this is the 3rd investigation. Now, you've already got a current federal investigation by our U.S. Attorney B.J. Pack into City Hall corruption. You've got the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, opening up a probe into funny business. This is very serious, too, with the Securities and Exchange Commission, because they're looking at possible falsification falsification of records. And again, I want to push back on my friend Theron, because he was challenging me to do some open records. I personally don't do them, but my company does, and I've commissioned, even earlier this year, you know this because you follow it, Dale Russell. Dale Russell. And so to finish my point, excuse me, Dale Cardwell, to finish my point, Dale Cardwell has been trying to get information on airport contracting. He filed it in March. He had to finally go to the Attorney General. Now, this is a sad thing. This is under Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. He finally gets some of the records he wants in May of this year. We're still working on a story that we'll publish in Insider Advantage, but now he's got to cross-check to see how accurate these city records are. So, Theron, this is not good, and I would hope you would tell Mayor Bottoms to try to be transparent and get it's a 10-day limit. It's a 10-day limit. It doesn't do any good for me to go down there.
So a couple things. So Phil did not join me for our viewers to come down on Monday. Instead, he sends his staff. And then two, on the Dale Caldwell situation, I think that we've talked about this on this show, that some of the information that he's requesting is very, very confidential. Some of it has to be redacted, and it has to protect the integrity and a lot of the people who work for City Hall. As far as this SEC investigation, look, it's a subpoena. The city of Atlanta is complying. It's an ongoing investigation. So it's not new breaking news where we got to talk about it every single week. But I think that at the end of the day, don't leave out the point that this is something that any airport would go through, and this is totally appropriate for them to try to identify how these funds were used or maybe misused. And so, again, I invite you again, Phil. I'm in town. Come down with the City Hall with me. File your own open records request. If you want to come in to meet with the mayor.
There's the Attorney General had to intervene to get it.
I think that she would be more than willing to talk to you and answer any questions you may have. But again, I think it's very disingenuous to come on this show week after week and sort of use these terms as we, or we're doing all these things. And look, and Dale, I have
a media company. It's a we.
Dale's a good man, and Dale can come with us down to City Hall, and I'll make sure that if he files for his open records, he can get them. But again, I think that you guys don't want to accept that this is an ongoing investigation, and it's being investigated to the top level, partly because this administration is doing everything they possibly can to comply and to make sure they get all the information.
Well, I want them to comply, but it's the law that you have to give 10 days. You have 10 days under state law to comply with an open records request. They keep breaking the law. I may bring the Attorney General with me if I have to come.
Chris Carr is a personal friend, and so bring him down. I think Chris Carr has been to City Hall more than you have. So,
all right, we're going to move on. Coming up, another study of high-speed rail, this one between Atlanta and Charlotte. Stay tuned.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
If you've been in Atlanta any length of time, there have been a lot of studies about high-speed rail. Pick a place that has a college from there to Atlanta. They've called it the Brain Train, Atlanta to Savannah, Atlanta to Chattanooga. Now we've learned GDOT and the Federal Railroad Administration are studying the possibility of high-speed rail between Atlanta and Charlotte. Price tag, $15 billion. My question is, why? Alexis,
so you can get there quicker. I don't know why.
I don't know. A lot of people really wanting to get to Charlotte.
You don't have to drive. It's because Charlotte has become the banking center of the Southeast, and so that's where you need to go if you need to do a deal. I don't know.
I just want to get to Alpharetta, Gwinnett County, quick. Can we just start there?
Right.
Phil.
Well, obviously we all need to look at this plan, but at first glance, it's very expensive. And what's going to happen in 15, 20 years? That's what we all have to look at in the transportation world. And can the money be spent better? We know that population is increasing, and you mentioned getting just from Atlanta to Alpharetta. I think that's more of a priority in suburban Atlanta, and we've talked about it. And the DOT has some good plans. I know that there's an argument for it, but where do we get the money?
Theron.
I think we should spend it. I mean, if we got the money, at the end of the day, one of the things that I was very happy with the study is that it does make some stops in rural counties in Georgia. It will stop in South Carolina. So for those of us who spend a lot of time in those states, I think actually it would be good. But the one plan I think was $6.2 billion to $8.4 billion to build, to me made the most sense because it was the quickest route to Charlotte. And so we also know that Charlotte, North Carolina wants to be the new Atlanta, and they've definitely made some strides to try to do that. But in order for us to continue to be this dominant city of the Southeast, I think we got to look at plans mess like this.
Yeah, long-range planning for sure. Well, the state taking bold action this week against one of the medical sterilization plants that the EPA says releases a cancer-causing chemical. The agency reports the state wants to temporarily shut down BD in Covington because of elevated levels of ethylene oxide near the plant. Governor Kemp saying our top priority is the health and well-being of Georgia families. BD is calling these actions unnecessary, but of course this is far from over. Janelle, this is an issue that you said, the government does not have to come in and shut these plants down. But your take on this?
Yeah, you know what? So, like I said, I'm the first one to defend a company that I feel may have been caught up in the political crosshairs. But I think in this situation here, it's right because you have to report, you have to do it appropriately. So I stand with the governor's decision on this one, and I hope that it is something that can be resolved quickly because I do think about the families that are impacted when they're unable to go to work. But we have to also think about the health of the community.
Well, considering how tense that first block was, we definitely want to hit on this issue because we're remembering former state senator Leroy Johnson, who died at the age of 89. He was the first 91. He was the first African American elected to the state Senate since Reconstruction. He's credited with quietly desegregating the state capitol, Alexis.
Yeah, he was a tremendous pillar of the community in terms of his activity and his history making as the first black elected to the legislature since Reconstruction. And the story about him desegregating the Capitol was really moving that I did not really know about until I read this in the paper this week, where he had pages that he was able to recruit, and instead of going to the capitals that still had white and colored signs over water fountains, he took them to the white fountain, and he took them to the white restroom. And the next day, the signs were taken down because people complained to the governor. And the governor said, wait a minute, this is not right. We should just not have it here.
That's right. That was Governor Carl Sanders. Right. I read the same story, and I think that was it was a good thing that obviously and that was when it was still the law of the state of Georgia, and I think that's when the barriers came down. Of course, with the 1964 Civil Rights Act 2 years later. That was an interesting story.
Yeah, it was.
I have to add that too, as an African American that is in politics, I am eternally grateful to any of the African Americans who paved the way for me, such as Leroy Johnson, Melvin Everson of the world. These guys are awesome, and I am definitely sending my hearts and prayers to his family.
Aaron, it's quite a history there.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to also add is that he's a former educator, was a former educator, and also he's an attorney. And so the thing that, last time I had a chance to see Senator Johnson, he talked about how far we've come as a people of color and African Americans to not only serve in the legislature, but to actually have roles as minority leaders and majority leaders in the Senate and the House. And so one of the things that he always prided himself on was educating and mentoring a lot of the newly elected officials that came into the state legislature. So he's definitely going to be missed.
I want to put in one last point. He was also instrumental in bringing Muhammad Ali back into the ring. He got a fight here in Georgia, and it was great for his opportunity for him.
It was very well said. Well, coming up, we'll have winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Theron, I'm totally starting with you.
No, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny. No, definitely want to make newly Commissioner-elect Joe Carnes a winner. He won the Fulton County Commission seat to go on to fulfill the term of Emma Darnell, who passed away. And also want to give a big shout out to the newly school board elected official who is preceding Byron Amos, and her name is Aretta Balden. So she's going to go on to the Atlanta School Board and want to give them big shout outs. And that's all I have this week.
Well, we've been trying to talk about those two races, but we've been running out of time, so thank you for mentioning them.
Well, I'll agree with Theron on Ms. Malden because she's also a proponent of charter schools, which have been successful in many areas of the Atlanta public school system. I've got a winner. We always kind of point out, all of us, sometimes civic work. The Marietta Rotary Club did its 100th anniversary. They do a lot of good for the community in Cobb County. In fact, they've actually, in those 100 years, they've chartered other clubs. They just chartered a Rotary Club in Brazil, so that's great. Wow. And Bobby Christine, the U.S. Attorney there over in Augusta and Savannah, that district, he is winning a national record for the most prosecutions of human smugglers, and so they've made that a top priority in that district. They're catching people in containers at the port of Savannah and getting them deported. So good for Bobby Christine.
Wow, that's a really big issue too.
Yes, so I have 3 quick winners. Former
You don't have to be
Representative-
quick. We actually have time. So
Oh,
it's
good.
okay.
So, former Representative Scott Hilton, he spoke at Calvin and I's town hall this past week. He's executive director of the Georgia's First Commission that was put in place by the current governor, Governor Kemp, and he spoke on cutting the red tape and doing business with the state. Also, Representative Burno, she hosted her annual For Girls Only conference this past week as well, where she had over 100 young ladies there, and I had the privilege of serving on a panel, so that was awesome. And lastly, I want to shout out Shondell. I met her at the conference. She works at the airport, and she watches every single Sunday. She has been in Georgia now for a few months, and she says she uses the Georgia Gang to teach her and keep her up on what's happening in the state. So,
Thank you for watching.
yeah, so
That's
thank you
great.
for watching.
All right, Alexis.
Okay, in addition to Leroy Johnson, I want to salute Spurgeon Richardson. He passed this week. He was a longtime head of the Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau, and he and I go way back. He hired me when I was just out of high school to work at Six Flags over Georgia when he was out there. So he will be missed, and he was a wonderful man. And also Nathan Deal has a new job. He's a teacher.
You saw my list.
All
didn't
right.
you?
And then my loser is going to be Dean Alford. He's not yet convicted, but he's accused of doing some terrible things. He was a member of the Board of Regents, and he's accused by 38 investors of swindling them out of their money as a Ponzi scheme, $6 million.
Following that. Well, we'll congratulate Atlanta United on another win, and they move on to the Eastern Conference Final. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.